Hey guys, what's going on? So this is a little different video for me. Normally I just put out some guides to go over builds that I put out. But it kind of felt like with a lot of the noise we're hearing about these patch notes, I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on them. Um, First I want to say we don't know what else is coming. We know that there's additional legendaries, there's additional uniques we're getting. So I really want this to be an objective look at this. I do think there are some major glaring concerns that need to be addressed, and I think we have that opportunity in the PTR to address those. I wanted to start this by kind of giving some big props though, because not all the patch notes are concerning. A lot of this is actually really great quality of life, and I kind of just wanted to start there and then go through the rest of the stuff and kind of give my thoughts on where we are with things. So first and foremost, the new quest line is going to be great. The new mechanic they're adding for the season, I'm incredibly looking forward to. This is going to be a very fun interaction. If we know anything about what they've done previously, the mobs will scale pretty well, so we should have some a good fun in the end game for pushing those higher levels. Tier 8s, I believe they said were the high. So it looks like a pretty cool mechanic. One thing I really like about this is it's giving us a new venue to get resources or other such things without having to run the same content. They did state that they're going to be masterworking materials in these crates. So while this is probably not going to be the primary source of those masterworking, it's probably going to be substantially less than we'd get from a reward from doing a pit. This is cool because it's not just going to be the same mechanic over and over. This is going to broaden our in-game things that we can do. And I think this is great. I think this is a great step forward for the end game. I'm really looking forward to this mechanic. And I'm really looking forward to see what kind of rewards we're going to get from this. So this is very cool. I think this is a great step in the right direction. And I'm truly looking forward to this. Some other quality of life that I think is great. The resetting of dungeons for bosses, I could not be happier about that. Running 10, 15 sets of Uber Durials, and every time having to zone out. Somebody's got to run to town to sell, but they forgot to reset before they portals. You have to reset again. I think this is great. It's just an instant respawn. If you need to go to town, you go to town, you come back, and you're good to go. The summoning of Arshan only costing 1 material instead of 4 is going to bring that back in line with the rest of the mechanics. Or some of the other bosses, considering you get substantially less of those and everything else. And I do think the fact that they're now dropping gold instead of just additional rare items, huge dub in respect to that. Don't even pick up the rares when we're doing our runs of the tormented bosses. We just leave the rares on the ground so we can keep going. So I think it's great we're going to be seeing additional gold. How much that additional gold is going to be, yet to be determined. We'll see how that looks in the PTR. Beast and Ice getting fixed, there's no problem with that. I think this is great, especially the sigil dust. It's kind of tedious to go in and craft, and you can only have so many in inventory at a time. So I think that's a really great a change. The Whisper mechanic, I think this is great that we're reducing what it takes to complete these. This will be interesting to see how this goes. So again, an incredible change here. Especially early into the season when you're looking for gold and materials. This is a great way to get it. Increasing the threat now consistently scales with the health. Cool. So that should give us a quicker threat, especially if you're using your Profane Mind Cage. They don't necessarily agree with this. The thing they said on the video was that they're reducing this because people were running around with hundreds. Well, the reason people were running around with hundreds is we had people abusing the Helltide glitch. Once that was fixed, I didn't see too many people running around with the infinite amount of that heart, so this will be interesting to see how much this tunes down for the amount of reward or hearts we're getting. This is whatever. We have to pick up sparks. Cool. It's not automatically picked up. Big deal. I really like the fact that they're giving more ways to get uniques and mythic uniques, especially due to the direction they said they're going. One thing they repeated multiple times was that they see too few uniques in builds. They're expecting 2 to 4, while right now they're seeing people from 0 to 2. I think that's a very fair assessment. When you look at the Necro top builds right now, you've got the Minions, which run none. So there's you a 0. We've got the Bone Spirit, which is running 2. You can slot in a third for Shaco, but it's not, one way or the other, it's not a win-win or a lose-lose if you put one or the other on. They have 2, and then Blight, it's 2 as well. So, I see what they're saying in terms of they're not seeing a lot of utilization of those uniques, but in the same conversation, the uniques we have are not powerful enough to replace the tempering and the affixes we're getting on legendary equipment. But I do like the fact that they are going to increase those, being able to get them from Whisper caches, being able to get them from the Obel's Guide, being able to get them from the boxes in Helltide. I think those are all great. We used to be able to do that in Helltide, but they turned that off when there was people getting the Barbs, especially, were getting Shacos. Just every single hat they opened was a Shaco. So they turned that off. And I also really like the fact that they're giving more... I guess we're now calling them mythic uniques instead of uber uniques. But I really like the fact that they're increasing the drop rate on those as well. I like the color they added to it. I think that's cool too. Another great change is the loot quality from treasure goblins. Especially, my lord, trying to chase them down, it's just not worth it. But it looks like now they're going to be. I feel like there's probably some disparity in the Angel's Breath part of it. Because, currently right now... I think I've got more Forgotten Souls than probably anything else. So they're adding more ways to get Forgotten Souls, and I still didn't see anything for increased Angel's Breaths. I think that's a good opportunity in PTR for us to address that. They already addressed the Veiled Crystals, and we don't have an issue with that. But Forgotten Souls, I got 6k of them versus the 6 total Angel Breaths. So definitely some opportunity on the Angel Breath side of things. But I do like the fact that we're getting... additional loot from the treasure goblins. This is interesting. I'm very curious to see how this plays out. Especially considering if the weapon damage per hit changes, especially for two-handed items. If Scythe is still the best highest hit or highest damage per hit, Scythes are still going to be used for a lot of stuff over swords and maces and everything else just because of the top hit. I'm very curious to see how they're going to balance this piece of it. But I don't see a problem with it. It's cool, sure. My Necro is going to be swinging a big old mace around. Sure, whatever. PTR stuff we already know about. That's going to be great. I am very much looking forward to getting into the PTR for this. I want to see how all these changes, and we're going to talk about a lot of those changes here in just a second. I think this is a great change. All classes can now roll these instead of us having to, if you wanted to make a Bone Spear and you wanted to roll the crit damage, you had to make a Rogue so you could get the crit strike damage on your weapon. So this is great. We've seen them do this in the past. Remember early Season 0, Season 1 with Infinimist specifically, people were rolling Sork so that they could roll through the enchanting for the look hit chance while barrier. So we've seen this in the past that they've done this to balance the classes out, allowing for the other classes to get the same stats that they want. And I think that they saw this a lot with the crit strike damage primarily. Barb's doing it on other weapons with the Rogues, same thing with Necros. So I think this is a great change. Alright, so let's get into the Necro for some of these uniques. One thing that I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around with their comments about using more uniques is the uniques that they're providing are not balancing what is required to run certain builds. So ignoring minions for a second, but this, for example, for the Bone Prison, I'm not entirely sure what this is going to look like. What build would this be used in? Right now, the primary build that uses Bone Prison is Bone Spirit. That's the primary build that uses Bone Prison at the moment. While this part's really cool, we're getting additional essence for 8 seconds, which we know is going to increase the damage of Bone Spirit. But what concerns me is you're missing your essence per second on the boots. You're missing your Bone Spirit ranks on the boots. So it is a little concerning to me that the uniques are not matching the power to be able to fully utilize the builds that were being built around. Don't know what else is coming for this. This may be just a piece of, maybe Bone Prison is going to be this crazy build, because we do have another aspect that gives more damage with that. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. This I'm not entirely sure about. Turning Sever into a, I'm sorry, this is the Golem one. Turning Golem into a movement speed ability. I don't know how that's going to work. It's kind of interesting. I don't know that I would want to lose my Occult Dominion, which is a good spot for that. This one I'm not entirely sure about at all. I'm very interested to see how these work out. I do, however, kind of like this one right here. Blood Mist turning into a mobility skill where you get to go twice as far with it. I think that's pretty dope. This one, however, and we're going to talk about the state of Bone Spirit in just a second. This is incredible. This is incredible for a couple of reasons. Bone Spirit's AI is pretty bad still. It can still go off on its own, so it fits especially going after targets inside of a Bone Prison. This is huge. So it's going to really give some better targeting features of this. But more importantly, I'm very interested to see if this is going to be able to overpower as it stands. Because if it does, this is going to be a substantial boost to this build. And quite crazy if it works. We'll see how some of these go out. This right here, Macro talked about this the other night. We got to make sure this even works in the first place, about minions fortifying you before we add more stuff for this. So this is very interesting. So we'll see how this goes. This one, however, is pretty impactful for a couple of builds. It uses minions for defense or for utility purposes. Bone Spear, Bone Spirit, two prime examples. They use them for primarily essence. So this is a kind of a huge thing that if it does work, this may be a very important temper over, say, a curse duration or a decrepify size. So this will be interesting to see how this works out. Alright, so jumping down into the balance changes. And this is where things get interesting. And this is the part where I kind of wanted to say, to try to hear through the noise. But at the same time, to kind of understand and try to set some expectations objectively. A lot of people are, asking questions regarding the nerfs or buffs and how does it impact. And I want to say this before we get into it. We don't know fully yet. As it stands right now, without knowing the additional uniques that are coming, without doing the additional legendary aspects that are coming, and also, we don't know if they are changing mob HPs, mob damage. We don't know if there's going to be any change to those enemies yet. Because if you remember the last time we had this huge damage balance, there was a substantial reduction in those mobs. So instead of doing the massive, go back to Bone Spear, the massive 30, 40, 50 million hits, they tuned down the mobs completely, and now hitting for 10 mil made sense. So we don't know all of the changes that are coming, and so I want to say that again. We'll just kind of set this, look at this objectively before we go into the PTR, because this is pre-PTR. We don't know anything. It's actually changing. We just know what they've given us, but what they have given us, I want to go over now and kind of get my thoughts on it. First question is, minions overpowering. There's been so many questions. Hey, is overpowering minions going to be a thing? This is the first statement of, I don't know yet. If there is no aspect or unique that is going to grant guaranteed minion overpower, the answer is no. This is just an additional, hey, minions can now overpower at a 3% chance to do it. Is that impactful? Not really at all. If they do give a way for minions to overpower consistently or guaranteed, then this is kind of a big deal. But until we see all those aspects and legendaries, we just don't know yet. So the question about overpowering, this is, to me right now, means nothing. It just doesn't do anything. There's a 3% chance that they're going to overpower. Big deal, right? All of your skills have that ability. Minions are now more aggressive and will automatically engage nearby enemies. This one's massive. I've been screaming this whole time. Minion AI is still clunky. It still doesn't meet the expectations of what a minion should do, especially if you're using certain things like taunt minions or the taunt golem. Why are they behind you when you're moving forward? So if they are going to be more aggressive, keeping up with you and attacking those mobs, this is going to be kind of big, especially for those builds that are using them as a frontline versus utility. This is fine. The Golem increased slam size is cool. I think it's probably needed. It is a very small range, but this is pretty cool. I don't know if I'm too keen on the actual animation of it, but them having a little bit better way to do this, if they get stuck in a wall or if there's a suppressor or a waller, just them having the ability to get to those mobs quicker is really cool. I think that's a great change. On the surface, for our next few things, these look great. Increasing damage across the board for underperforming skills, I think, is a very good step in the right direction. So I want to take that comment in two pieces. So I want to talk about what that means versus what happens a little bit later on. So increasing the damage here for Sever, fantastic. It needs it. Increases the secondary damage, that's great. The lucky hit chance. I've been screaming since preseason that lucky hit chance on Sever is abysmal, and it just doesn't match. Sever is at its best when you're running it as a crit build, similar to Bone Spear. Bone Spear having over double the lucky hit chance of Sever just didn't make sense to me. So I do like the fact that the lucky hit chance is being increased here. I'd like to see what that really looks like and what kind of impact that 5% is going to make. But I think those are great changes to Sever. Sever is one of the more underperforming builds. So I think that's great. I think there's nothing wrong with the percent that they did increase it. I think that's actually a pretty substantial jump. Going from 80 to 110% is pretty impressive. That's a 40-something percent increase in damage. Blight. This one really, to me, is concerning, considering what we are about to talk about. But increasing it to 30%, increasing it 30%, cool, whatever. Blight's damage is already pretty bad, so we'll, increasing it in anything is great, but it's not going to be very impactful. Bloodwave, this is awesome. This is huge. Bloodwave is already performing pretty well. With this, I think that's pretty cool. There's going to be some changes, and OP Bloodwave is going to be an actual build that's going to be very relevant. So this is a cool change. I think this is one of the Bloodwave is one of the only builds that actually saw a buff with all of this. So that's going to be pretty cool. And if things stay the way they are, Bloodwave is probably going to be one of our stronger builds for Season 5. Shadow Blight. Sure, increasing its damage. I've been saying forever that Shadow Blight's damage is garbage. So sure, increasing the damage of it, that's cool. Hits down from 10 to 8, that's also cool. That means you only have to have 80 instances of shadow damage hitting a mob before a Shadow Blight goes off, which is cool, going down from 100. And this has been a big thing for a lot of people not understanding how Shadow Blight works in the first place, with it needing to hit the same mob for those instances. So this is kind of huge because it's going to make Shadow Blight easier to go off and it's going to do more damage. How impactful is that going to be? Not much right now. Again, that's still to be seen with what other changes may come with other uniques and legendaries. So we'll just have to see. Hellbent Commander. This is kind of a nerf, but not really. So what you're getting now is instead of it sometimes being a 45%, it's now always a 30%. If you're running high pits, this is not very active. It's not active all the time. I don't run minions much. I have a very poorly geared one that at least serves its purpose. And you can see very clearly that it's not always active. So this is pretty big. While it's technically a nerf, I think it's probably going to get more. I think you're going to get more damage out of this than losing the 45% multiplier down to 30. So this one I think is actually going to be a buff versus the nerf that it actually is. So think about that too. So, when Hellbent Commander currently way it is, you have to be close to them. If you're running a Golem build, how many times are you actually standing next to your Golem? And if you're running a mage build, there's a lot of times that you're running ahead of your mages and you're not close to them either, and that's your main damage source. So I do think you're going to see this is actually going to be a buff. Now, this is the first part that really makes me question the remainder of these changes. Blighted's... I have no problem with Blighted being nerfed. Especially considering they're making it easier for Shadow Blight itself to go off. I do have a problem for how much they have nerfed it. The primary builds that are going to benefit the most from the Blighted aspect are going to be your shadow builds, of course. Yes, we've got Minion builds running it now. Other builds can use it. If you can slot in even minions with Aphotic, you can get the Shadow Blight going, or throwing in a BCE, you can get Shadow Blight going. But what this is really going to impact is primarily the shadow builds that can keep it up full time. The only shadow build currently that was performing well is the Blight Ebon Piercer build. All of the other shadow builds are going to be negatively impacted by this without any, as they put it here, their own statement is to compensate for the change. We're increasing the baseline power of the Darkness core skills and Shadow Blight with the goal of keeping these builds at approximately the same power level. So, just that sentence in itself is not accurate. Nothing that they've given, and we haven't even gotten to the Wither changes. Nothing in that they've said in this statement, and any of the changes that they made to those other, primarily Severin and Blight, neither one of those changes do compensate for losing, in most cases, a 240% or a 3.4 multiplier. None. It's now coming down to a 50% or 100% if it's on a two-handed. So we're going from a 3.4 to a 2 multiplier. Why I say this is a little bit too drastic. Aspect of the Damned is a 50%. And all you have to do is cast a curse. So for me, why this is so frustrating is we already have to have, it's harder to get this aspect going than it is some of the other multipliers. Aspect of the Damned is a 50% multiplier. And it is now better to throw on a two-hander. Aspect of the Damned is now more impactful to put on a two-hander than Blighted. I do think it's warranted that Shadow Blight that Blighted aspect did get nerfed. I do not think going from a 3.4 to a 2 was warranted. Especially coupled with the Wither change that we're going to talk about in a second. So this one really scares me. There is a very huge gap in the way that they are portraying the compensation for Blighted, especially for Blight itself. The biggest. Well, let me say it this way: we are a class that doesn't have a core build, a core skill build, other than Bone Spirit that does anything impactful. Blight itself is less than 5% of the damage of the Ebon Piercer build. Ebon Piercer itself carries the entire weight of that build. So by increasing Shadow or Blight's damage by 30% means nothing, because the Ebon Piercer is a flat damage and it's not impacted at all by Blight ranks, Blight skill damage. It is directly impacted by the flat damage and the modifiers to it. So this means nothing. So what this means is if we were to take Ebon Piercer off and make a Blight build, it's going to do absolutely nothing. It is going to be an abysmal damage value, and it's not going to go into any high tiers. It's just not. It's not going to perform. So Ebon Piercer is carrying the weight of this. So by now nerfing the Shadow Blight damage, it is not compensated by giving us a 30% increase. So there is this own statement in their own words does not justify the nerf of this magnitude for Blighted aspect. So this one's interesting. I don't know how this is going to look. Is there an actual Bone Prison build? Maybe. With a new unique, maybe we'll throw in a Bone Prison / Corpse Tendril damage build, where we're focusing on Corpse Tendril and Bone Prism as our damage skills. I don't know, maybe. This is interesting. This to me means nothing. This means nothing at all. This Blight damage is absolutely garbage. So this means nothing. This is a nothing burger to me. This is just an aspect they changed, and it didn't do anything in the first place. Now it does nothing still. This is also not that impactful. This is still not helping the blood builds whatsoever. Sure, we're going to do a little extra damage for them, but it's also the lowest performing build type of the Necros is blood, and it is once again neglected. This one I do not understand in any way. This hurts underperforming builds way more than it's hurting the top tier builds. Primarily talking about Bone Spirit. A 5% reduction in the crit chance means nothing to that build. You get the 12% from Inspiring Commander. You get 4% from Entomb. You get about 10% from Serration. And then you're getting, in this case, the 20% from Tendrils. So all this means is your base crit chance needs to be around 55% on your paper sheet crit chance. And that is incredibly easy obtained by getting 3 GA crit strike chances on your rings, your gloves, and then, of course, your Banished Lord, which is around 5 to 8%. So there is no issue for the highest performing crit build in our class to reach this. And this 10% reduction as a multiplier also is not going to be substantially impactful for Bone Spirit, especially if the new aspect is also going to overpower. So this does not in any way bring down the highest performing builds. All it's doing is effectively nerfing our underperformings. When you look at other builds like Sever, which relies heavily on crit chance, Sever in itself has a very hard time getting to a 100% crit chance. So to say you're taking 5% more away from Sever build, which is already underperforming, is massive. When you look at Blood builds, which has to use a lot of uniques to get their build going, it's underperforming, in our lowest tier pushing builds or Blood builds. So now another crit-starved build is now being penalized, and it's already underperforming, and now we're saying, hey, you've also lost 5% more crit chance. I don't understand this. This makes no sense to me. The only thing that I can remotely understand about this is they've said they're using some sort of data analytics in this, and the only thing that makes sense to me is this aspect is being used more than most other aspects across the board for classes or builds for Necros. And it is exactly that. It's to help get to that next level of crit chance. So, just because an item is used a lot does not mean it's overpowered and needs to be nerfed. So this is a huge, very negative thing in my opinion. This one made no sense. It's not going to hurt the overperforming builds. It is absolutely devastating, though, to underperforming builds, and I cannot in any way get on board with this. This is a cool one. This is a great change on this aspect. For you that have followed my Bone Spirit build, me and a couple of the guys from Sanctuary Discord keep going back and forth on this one. This no longer is a should we use this, could we use this. This is a huge buff for this aspect. And so instead of having to consume a corpse, use a core skill, consume a corpse, use a core skill, when you consume a corpse, you get that buff for 5 seconds. So this is massive for me. It's a great multiplier. For y'all that have really looked at the high-end Bone Spirit build, this one's cool because as you get to the point where you no longer need Tormented, and yes, we do get to a point we don't need it, which is really cool in this build. So this actually replaces the Torment as it stands now. We're utilizing it in the higher-end Bone Spirits. So this is cool. This is going to be a buff. Instead of a max 50%, it's now max 30, but it's just up. And it damages your core skills in general. So you don't have to consume a corpse, then use a core, then consume a corpse, then use a core. You're just getting that buff for as long as you keep it going. So I think this is a massive change for this aspect, and I'm really excited about this one. To me, this is another nothing burger. The Blood Moon Breaches changes is massive, but once again, this primarily only benefits Bone Spirit at the moment. Yeah, it's going to impact... this will impact the new OP Bone Wave that's being thrown out. This will impact that as well, because you can do it every time. That's why Bone Spirit is so important, because you can get an overpower every single cast. So this is a massive buff for overpowered Bone Spirit and the new overpowered Bone Wave. It's, again, a nothing burger for Blood builds, because you can't guarantee it every single cast Blood overpowering. So this is just for every X number 3, 4, 5 casts of your Blood skills, you're going to get it to overpower for a little more, but it's still much less impactful for the blood builds as it is the ones that can guarantee it every single cast. Sure, core skill damage, affix plate, sure, Tides of Blood, cool. This is still not bringing blood up to where it needs to be. This one makes no sense to me. We're replacing lucky hit chance with another absolutely meaningless stat on Mendel ring because the ring does not scale off of summon damage. Sure, we get a little bit of additive summon damage for your minions, but you're going from a kind of a useless affix on the ring to another useless affix because it's just a very, 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 very small additive value. So you're not going to see any visible changes in damage from this. But at the same time, we're removing the summon damage. Like we're adding on this one and removing it from this one. But I'm actually cool with this. I don't use this amulet, but any move speed's awesome. I love move speed. I've always loved move speed. And now we get to the craziest one in my opinion. I know that there's been a lot of talk about this from other people, but I kind of wanted to give my thoughts on it. I don't have a problem with them nerfing this ability or this Paragon. This, however, was the coolest Paragon node for shadow builds in the game. Our Paragon, and y'all have heard me talk about the Paragon situation more times than I can count. Paragons are so boring now. All Paragon is, you go and grab your HP nodes, get some resist or armor if you need them, and then you fill out as many Paragons as you can to get to the glyphs so you can get your multiplier from the glyphs. So this is one Paragon node on our boards that really had a huge impact. So why this is such a massive change is, first off, they've reduced our biggest multiplier down to nothing. It is just a regular multiplier now. And again, aspect of the dam is better off in the two-hander now. So the blighted aspect is, to me, it's just, it could even in reality could be replaced by another aspect that we're probably going to see this season, or even replaced by a unique. That is one that could be done because it is a harder to achieve multiplier than aspect of the damned by just casting a curse. So we're already losing our biggest multiplier from aspects, and now we are losing the one thing that we had as dot builds to bring us up to par with crit builds. So my current build, I'm sitting at 2820, which is 2 over that specific wither breakpoint of 60. Currently right now I'm at 52% and a 238% increase. So what this means is half of the time my dots are going to do an additional damage. That's all that means. So we can't reach the 100% crit threshold, or call it crit. That crit builds can, but half the time we're going to be able to do additional damage. So while crit builds can already reach that 100% cap and always do their additional damage, we can do it half the time. So this was what was so great about this season, is we finally got into a position in the season where we were able to bring this node up substantially. We already went through the change of it, removing it from willpower to int, and then they changed how it scaled. So this is, we finally had a season of which this mattered. However, the only build it truly impacted was the Ebon Piercer build. Sever's not impacted because it's a crit build, and most of the time when I'm building out a Sever, I don't even put Wither in it. Bloody Corpse Explosion builds, they were already incredibly underperforming, so they're nerfed. Blight by itself, which was incredibly underperforming, completely gutted. And so now, instead of having a 50% chance by stacking it to 27, what is that? 2,700 even? Is that correct? Yes, 2,700 even got you to 50%. Then down to 230% extra damage. We are now maxing this at 12, which gives us a 25% chance and a 130% multiplier. So instead of having a 50-50 coin flip, we now have a 1 in 4 chances that we're doing the damage. So this is incredibly... This one is probably the worst nerf for shadow builds of the other changes. and to their own comment, their own statement, that they were making it so that, where was the statement under Blighted? To compensate for this change under Blighted, what is the compensation for bringing down Wither to a 200 or 1200 max? Well, what this is going to truly mean is you're going to have additional slots where you can put in a defense, for example. But at that point, all you're doing is making it harder for the boss to kill you or the mobs to kill you, and you're not doing the damage you need to be able to push those tiers. So sure, you may be able to tank an echo mechanic, but you're not going to kill the boss. You don't have the damage to do so. So this one impacts across the board. This one is going to completely shut down any reason to run Shadow at all. This also shuts down, the highest performing Shadow build, which is Ebon Piercer. We don't have that anymore. So this is really a very curious change to me. This one, above all, should really be looked at. There's a lot that should be looked at for this, but this one more so than others. So kind of what does this mean overall? Well, our top performing builds are Minions, Bone Spirit, and Ebon Piercer at the moment. Well, Ebon Piercer is not a higher performer through these changes. Minions got a substantial... The Shadow Minions got a substantial nerf due to the Blighted aspect. Minions by themselves are going to get actually like a hybrid build, which is not performing to either Golem Shadow or Mage Shadow. It will now because their Hellbent commander is going to impact them drastically because you're going to get the bonus for both of them. So that one's going to be a little bit better performing. And our other one, which is Bone Spirit, got buffs across the board. So as it stands right now, our highest performing build, and Bone Spirit currently is the highest performing, even tied with both, tied with Golems. There's not really, we don't have any true data on mages currently. But as it stands right now, if nothing else changes, we have Bone Spirit and some version of Minions. So it's really unfortunate because season to season you should see some variance in what's working. Especially considering that Diablo 4's own statement to this fact was they want people to be able to run whatever they want to run. And the way it sits right now is that's not happening. If you want to run a build, sure, but you're not going to be able to go to, do the things that these other builds are going to be able to do. And especially considering that our underperforming builds, which from season to season should have been buffed to some degree, every one of them, every single one of the underperforming builds are now performing worse with the current changes. So, you don't see anything in this patch notes at all about Bone Spear. Bone Spear received a direct nerf from the Corpse Tendrils Grasping Vein aspect. Blood, you didn't really see anything mentioned about Blood Lance or Blood Surge. Both of them directly negatively impacted by the Grasping Veins nerf. So our builds that were not performing to any expectations are now worse than they were going into a new season, where you should expect some change in underperforming builds to be brought up to meet those performing builds. So again, to kind of wrap all this up, we don't know what else is coming. There could be some aspects and uniques that are coming and we don't know about them yet that completely change this narrative and that would completely negate having this massive of a nerf to shadow builds. There maybe is something that brings blood up to where it should and can do more than just bore a mob to death. Maybe there is something that's going to create a new meta. Maybe there is a Bone Prison build that with other uniques or aspects we're going to see that are going to bring something like a crazy off meta that it turns into the meta for Bone Prison or Corpse Tendril. So we don't really know. But I just wanted my thoughts on what we've seen on paper that they wanted to share as what they called balance changes. Because there really wasn't a balance change in what they've given us. So the takeaway for me is I'm very curious to what this is going to look like on the PTR. The way it stands right now, this is, in my opinion, the worst state Necro is going to be in so far in this game if nothing changes from these notes. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. I've been talking to a lot of the other Necro theory crafters and content creators about this since we got it, and there is a consistent thought that this is the worst state we've been in. So I'm concerned. I'm not I'm not throwing out all the goodwill that they bought with the Season 4 yet, because I do think they have an opportunity to show us that the direction they're going, but right now I just don't see it. And that's because we don't have everything yet. And once we do, it very well may change everyone's perspective, and we could go into Season 5 as the best class in the game, which would be awesome. But that may not be the case. And we're also hoping that some of these, if this is truly the state of Necro, these comments coming into PTR are going to be able to change some of what we expect and what we may see going into Season 5. So, so thank you very much. If you've got any comments, leave them here. If you like what you heard and you're new here, subscribe, please. I'd love it. If not, well, it's cool that you hung out, and we'll see y'all next time. Thanks a lot, guys.